Okay, so let's see this question on sentence placement. So, what's the sentence, original sentence is talking about? So, original sentence says that dualism was long held as the defining feature of developing countries in contrast to the developed countries, where frontier technologies and high productivities were assumed to prevail. Okay, so basically, we can say that the missing sentence actually explains about how dualism, okay, so it's how dualism was once seen as something that separated developing from developed countries, right? So dualism was long held as a defining feature of developing countries in contrast to the developed countries. So how it was seen, that was, I would say, that was long held. So it was seen, okay, as something that separated developing countries from developed countries. And then let's get into it, okay. Initially at the first sentence, maybe let's keep it on a hold, right? So we need to look at the sentence first, right? So sentence first says that at the core of at the core of the development economics lies the idea of productive dualism, that poor countries' economies are split between a narrow modern sector that use advanced technologies and larger traditional sector characterized by very low productivity. Okay. Now, what this line is, a sentence is saying is that the sentence is telling you that kind of, we can say that at the core of the development, okay, so core of the development economics lies the idea of productive dualism, that poor countries economies are split between a narrow modern sector that uses advanced technologies and larger traditional sector characterized by very low productivity. Okay, now the sentence cannot actually fit in here because this particular missing sentence cannot fit here, okay, because the dualism for the first time is being kind of introduced, okay. So this sentence kind of introduced the concept of dualism, okay. So we would put the missing sentence before this because the reader does not yet know what dualism means, okay. So blank one definitely does not fit in here, right? Now, while this distinction between developing and advanced economies may have made some sense in the 1950s and 1960s, it is no longer appears to be very relevant. Okay. Now, the two is the best placement. Now, why two is the best placement? Because the missing sentence explains that what the distinction actually was. Okay. So that dualism used to define developing countries while developed ones had advanced technology. Okay. So that's the case that the missing sentence somewhat serves the purpose here, that traditional sector, so dualism was long held as a defining feature for developing countries in contrast to developed countries where frontier technologies and high productivities were assumed to prevail. Okay. So while this distinction, okay, so this distinction is clearly highlighted by this continuation. So this my missing sentence is kind of talking about the distinction. Okay. So this distinction here makes the sentence, okay, makes the logic. So while these distinctions become between developing and advanced economies, developed countries may have made some sense in the 1950s because it was long held, okay, past mein tha, okay. So that is the case. It defined dualism, okay, and it kind of also distinguish between developing countries and developed countries. That is what the missing sentence is, okay. And then later on it says that it is no longer it is outdated now, right? Outdated है तो इसके यहाँ पे long held था, तो ये यहाँ पे outdated वाला भी long held था, तो long held means that it is not applicable right now, okay. So that's the same case that we can see a lot of resonance here in the blank number two, and that's the reason that the sentence fits in the blank number two, okay. Now let's analyze why it does not fit in a blank number 3 and a 4. So it says that a combination of forces have produced a widening gap between the winners and those left behind. Okay. And then convergence between poor and rich. So again, does not make a sense, no? It says that a widening gap ho gaya hai. After 3, the paragraph is already talking about modern widening gaps with advanced economies. Okay. So a combination have produced a widening gap between, okay. So widening gap with advanced economy. So it's too late to go back to describing the old distinction between developing and developed countries here. So that's the reason that the third is not the correct placement. Now, convergence between poor and rich parts of the economy was arrested and regional disparities widened. Okay. As a result, policymakers in advanced economies are now grappling with the same questions that have long preoccupied developing economies, mainly how to close the gap with the more advanced parts of the economy, right? Again, 2 does not make a sense because blank 4 comes at the end summarizing the consequences, okay, कि क्या हुआ उसका as a result of all these, okay. So that's the reason that the missing sentence would not fit. either here also, right? Hope you got this question. So